Hi, David Hood here, the Dallas SEO Geek, and in this video I'm going to talk about how long until you get results from SEO. And I get this question all the time, and I really want to emphasize all of the different factors and many different ways in which the results can be affected in this video, because I don't think many people understand. I think it's just like, okay, well, maybe there's two different paths and you do these 10 things and then you get results, and it's a pretty straightforward process, and that's just not how it works. I've been involved in many SEO projects, and every single one is at least a little bit different. Okay, so I put this massively confusing chart on here. Let's say these are all sites and they all have different opportunities and they're all interlinked differently, and so there's just a bunch of different ways in which things can be done. So if I were to give one number or one kind of answer, it'd be like 1 to 9 months. I haven't seen 9 months, but I could see something going 9 months. But usually, I would say that if we're going to narrow that band, I'd say probably something more like 3 to 6 months or 3 to 5 months is what I would expect for the average project. Depends on lots of different things. And here's a bunch of questions that need to be answered in order to answer this precisely. Where are you now? So, like, what does Google think of your site? Are you really authoritative? Do you have a brand new site? Those are very different places in the process. If you have a really new site, it'll take longer. But if you've already got a lot of authority and you've been around for a while and you've got lots of trusted, powerful links to your site, and your site is already pretty well built, then it won't take as long. If a lot of the research has been done, I mean, there's just a lot of different things. What kind of online assets do you have to leverage for SEO? If you've got a lot of YouTube videos, that's great, and that's going to speed up the process. If you don't have any content whatsoever, that's going to take time because we have to build some of that content as we build the site out. What kind of competition do you face? If you're a poodle fluffer versus if you're a lawyer in a major city, those are going to be two very different levels of competition. Are you going for a national site or a local site? If you're going after national keywords, national search phrases, it's just going to take longer. Those are going to be more competitive. Gets something that gets searched 50,000 times a month versus something that gets searched 50 times a month. Generally speaking, it's going to be a big competition difference. So there's a lot of different angles to look at that. Now, ultimately, competition. I don't really worry too much about competition in the long term because anything can be ranked for. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to rank you #1 for the term Microsoft, but anything that's not like a branded term can be ranked for if you go after it right and you do the right things and you have the right amount of patience for it. How aggressive do you want to be? Sometimes people they ask this question, but it's like, well, you haven't decided what level of package to be on. I'll offer different levels of package. If you're on the low level package, it'll take longer. If you're on the more aggressive package, it's faster. So that can make a big difference. The more aggressive packages are, in my opinion, sometimes 100 or 1,000 times more powerful than the basic packages, which are still pretty powerful. And so when you think about that, there's a wide variety of differences. Are you willing to put a little bit of energy into the process, or a lot of energy? I have had clients where I gave them things to do, and boom, within a couple days, they just knocked out a lot of stuff. And that same amount of work, some clients over 6 months, they will do 1/10 of that work, and it really slows down the process. So if a client is not responsive and not really doing the things that I asked them for, or if it takes a long time, that's just going to slow things down, period. This is sort of outside my control. There's only so much I can get you to do without coming over and beating you over the head. What kind of opportunities are there out there for you? Are there easy opportunities that are profitable? A lot of markets and a lot of businesses have opportunities that we can target pretty quickly. That's why sometimes I can get like 4 to 6 weeks we can get results. It depends. But some businesses, the opportunities out there are all competitive, and there's not nearly as many easy opportunities. So, what kind of low-hanging fruit do you have? How ambitious do you want to be? This actually works kind of the opposite of what you would think. If you want to be really ambitious, you would expect something longer. So we're envisioning building a bigger house. It takes longer to build a bigger house. So we're targeting more things. We have a big project in mind. We want to drive a lot of traffic. Right? If you just want to target something very narrow, that's going to be a lot faster, and it's going to be easier to rank for that. If your site is all about one narrow concept, Google sees that and they look at it and they go, okay, well, this is very relevant to this one specific thing. Now you're not going to rank for anything outside that. Now if you expand that to more related concepts, ranking for that narrow thing is going to be more difficult because your site isn't just about that narrow thing. So generally this will make it take longer. How easy is it to map out the concept of your site? How deep does the keyword research go? Sometimes when I'm digging in the research, man, it's a really complicated market. There's a lot of different opportunities, a lot of different angles to look at it, and this takes longer. There's more feedback back and forth. I have to look up more search phrases. Some things are really simple and easy to understand, or I've done the keyword research before. Come in, look at the research. I already know the gist of what we're going to map out, and it doesn't take that long, right? And in some markets, there's so many opportunities that it takes a long time to map out what you're doing. It can take 2 months, usually not more than that, to figure out, okay, this is the roadmap for what we want to build. I also want you to be aware of there's hidden metrics that Google and the other search engines have that we just can't possibly know in general, and we probably will never know. For example, you might not know of the searches, and when they put you up on the search phrase, how much do you get clicked on? So if you're number 3 for something, how much do you get clicked on in the search results? Versus the number 2 and the number 4 spot and all the other spots. Well, you can't really know that. Google will maybe tell you a little bit about that, but even then, I'm not really sure that how true or honest that is. You can't really know for sure. And there's lots of other things that I'm sure that they don't share publicly that people just don't know. I'm not claiming to know every little secret that Google has, and anyone who does, even if they were to work for Google, the amount of code that Google has built and the amount of information they process, even someone working for Google probably doesn't know everything. No matter how high up they are. Maybe there's a couple people in their entire company, a handful of people. Okay, so all these that I've put here, these are all things that you answer these questions, or you try your best to answer these questions, and it affects the length of the project. So, when someone asks and I don't give a specific answer, they might look at it as weakness, when in fact it's just me being honest and straightforward. And when a lot of other companies are going to say, okay, they're going to give a specific number, like 3 months or 6 months or something like that. And in my opinion, if they're giving you a very specific answer on this question without having gone through the whole process of really looking at your site and analyzing it fully and picking a package and picking all the different angles that you want to go for it, then in my opinion, they don't have enough experience to understand all the different ways in which a project can be affected and slowed down or sped up. Okay, so let me come up with there's a couple of analogies that help understand, and this one actually came from a client. So, if you build a house out of popsicle sticks, that'll take faster than building a real house. And you can do that with SEO. You can get faster results sometimes by building a house out of popsicle sticks. Now, it won't last as long, and you miss a lot of opportunities. So I think that's a good analogy. And so, you can get faster results, but that's not necessarily always a good thing. Okay, so let's say you've got a stinky floor, or you've got some smell coming from the floor in your house. You go in there and you hire a guy and you say, well, how long will it take to fix, or how much will it cost to fix? And he goes, he's not going to just give you a number. They just say, well, I'm going to have to pull the floor up and see what I find. And that's a little bit like what SEO is like. Until we go and we dig in there, we're not going to know all the little things that need to be done. And we have an idea, and we know in some categories what we want to focus on and what certain types of metrics or angles that we want to attack, but the details of it can vary dramatically once you get in there. It's also an iterative process, and this basically means it's a repetitive process, and you kind of go back and forth, and you kind of do the same thing over and over again. Do, check, analyze, or plan, develop, test. Plan, develop, test. So we do some SEO, we check to see what kind of results there are, we analyze that, and then we do some more, and depending on what we found in our analysis. And this is a lot of what SEO is. So what are you going to do month 1, 2, 3, and 4? Well, generally speaking, I do have a plan. We've got a plan for what we want to do, but we can't tell you every detail of every plan. We're gonna do this thing here and this thing here and this thing here, and create 100 line items of the actions that we're gonna do, because that's not practical. Not only that, I didn't even put this in here, but for myself, I'm constantly trying to test new ideas, and I'm constantly building software and tools that does new things. And when I come up with something new, if 3 months into a project and it's something that works for a client, I'm just going to use it on that client. And so I wouldn't want to box myself into just picking that one thing, and that can speed up a project. So there are also unique opportunities to your business and your market. the opportunities for a dentist versus a lawyer are very different. And so understanding that, that's again why you can't just give like one number. Here's something that's a little bit unrelated but closely related. Sometimes it's difficult to fully analyze improvements. I have had clients say, we're not improving, and then I go and I dig into the numbers and I say, no, we are, based upon these metrics, and we look at it as a whole. And so this is difficult for several reasons. It depends on the market. Sometimes it's a lot easier to see than other times. If you added 10 times the amount of search engine traffic, then that's pretty obvious. But some markets are cyclical, so that makes it really difficult. If have improvements been made, we can't just look at this month versus the previous month, because the previous month, well, there was just in general there's twice as much search volume for your major search phrases. There was a client of mine who there was a month, if you went from their high month to the low month of the year for their major search phrases, there was it was about I would say 5 to 10 times the difference. So in that way, we had to really look at a long-term data, and the longer you look at it, also the less accurate it is. And so that goes back to the current traffic. And here's the general process for what we should see, the flow of improvements. First, you should see rankings improvement, but going from 70th to 15th doesn't really give you any traffic. But eventually you should see an improvement in traffic and then improvement in sales. And so that's the general way we go about it. Now, ultimately, I think that I'm responsible for providing you with your traffic that is your target market. And if I can make a big improvement there, then I consider my job to be well done. The sales, that is a lot up to you, and yes, it is partially up to me as well, and so that's kind of something we work together on. But ultimately, I think I'm judged on the traffic. Now, the rankings, short term, the rankings are very helpful in understanding kind of where we're at, but long term, we want to see the traffic. There's the other thing. There are things that are outside of my control or your SEO team's control that can go very wrong. If your site gets hacked and you don't notice it, and they do weird things, then that can plummet rankings. And if you have trouble fixing that, Google might completely penalize you for that until you get it fixed. And so that would be something that could seriously set back a project. I also have had an experience of a client undoing changes. It was more the employee of a client thought she knew a lot more than she did, and went in and made a lot of changes to the site, and the traffic plummeted. And that's something that I can't really be responsible for. Ultimately, there's these weird things that happen, and I hope that some clients are understanding about that, and some people will still blame their SEO consultant, and I think that's unreasonable, but it is what it is, and ultimately that's what I'm responsible for, and I do my best to prevent that. But you can't prevent everything. Also, negative SEO, you can't really stop negative SEO. You can't stop someone from linking to you. If you don't know what negative SEO is, essentially someone spamming your site. They point spam to your site. You can't really stop it. There are things that you can do to mitigate the effects of it. And it's pretty difficult to do negative SEO really well, but it's not impossible. And there's other forms of negative SEO that are very hard to detect. So that's something to keep in mind. I want to give you a few examples just right off the top of my head as I was building this of strange things that happen, and the wide variety of examples. So there was a client that I had that was in an ultra competitive market, very competitive. They had a super low budget. And after 3 months, they weren't seeing like lots of results, and they were really upset. And it was just like, look, this is not, first of all, I didn't promise results. Second of all, you're on a really low package. At this point, I don't even offer any package anywhere near that price. And you're going after huge keywords that are highly competitive. And so, this is where, maybe I could have done a better job of managing their expectations. But they wouldn't listen to me. They wouldn't listen to why it's like that, and they kind of made up their mind. And once they made up their mind, it was over. And that's it's unfortunate for them, and but that's just how it works sometimes. Another example was I remember at about 3.5 months, the client was freaking out because there was like no improvements. They were nowhere to be found. But then starting in month 4. Things started to come around, and in about 6 months, they were on the first page for some really big competitive search phrases. Now, sometimes what happens is there's roadblocks that you have to go through, and you don't know how many roadblocks there are until you try to go through them. And so I think that was the case here, and we needed to kind of flip a switch, or we needed to get to a certain point, and I didn't know that there's no way to really know that distance, and the distance was further to kind of break through the barrier to really see the improvements. Not only that, but in this example also, the client was very unresponsive to doing some things I asked. There's just like a few simple things, and the client was not responsive. So that definitely slowed things down. Now I want to give some other examples. So there's another example where it was 6 weeks, lots of valuable traffic in a competitive niche, from zero, from a brand new site, to lots of super valuable traffic in a competitive niche. Now, part of this was the client was extremely responsive, and when I gave him things to do, he did them, and he did them very quickly, and he did them very well, and he did not hesitate. And so this was not only that, but the research portion of it went pretty quickly, because he understood what I was asking of him, and it was a market that I think I understood pretty well, and so that process was shortened. So that was great, right? There's another example, almost the same thing happened, where it was not quite of a competitive niche, but results in like 3 to 6 weeks, and after 3 months they were like #1 for some really big terms, and #1 through 3 for lots of terms like that. That's happened several times. There's lots of cases like that. So, you know, I don't want you to think that it can't be fast, but it can also take time. There are so many factors involved in how long it takes to rank. So hopefully this is helpful. I think this video is long enough. I appreciate your time, and let me know if you have any questions or thoughts on this. I'd be happy to answer them. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye.